Captain Sarah Chen stood at the bridge of the HSS Defiant, her dark eyes fixed on the massive alien vessel that filled the main viewport. The ship's crystalline structure seemed to absorb starlight rather than reflect it, its angular geometry defying human architectural sensibilities. After 6 months of tracking mysterious signals at the edge of colonized space, they'd finally found their source. Analysis complete, Captain. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez reported from his science station, his voice tight with concern. Their ship mass is roughly 15 times ours. Energy readings are, well, they're off our established scales. Sarah nodded, maintaining her composed demeanor despite the gravity of the situation. The Defiant had been chosen for this mission precisely because it represented humanity's best, a perfect blend of diplomacy and defensive capability. But facing this behemoth, she felt like a rowboat beside an aircraft carrier. "Open a channel," she ordered. Standard first contact protocols. Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka's fingers danced across her console. Channel open, broadcasting in all known frequencies and formats. Sarah straightened her uniform and spoke clearly. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human spaceship Defiant. We come in peace, seeking diplomatic contact and cultural exchange." The response came not as words but as a sensation. A cold, probing presence that swept through the bridge like an Arctic wind. Crew members shuddered, some grabbing their heads as if struck by sudden migraines. Multiple energy signatures. Marcus shouted, "They're scanning us." "No, they're trying to interface with our systems." Sarah's training kicked in. Shields up, countermeasures active. But it was too late. The alien presence had already breached their firewalls, sifting through their databases with terrifying efficiency. On screens across the bridge, data flashed past faster than human eyes could track. "They're not just scanning our systems," Dr. Elena Santos, the ship's xenobiologist, said from her station. "This is some form of direct neural interface technology. They're trying to connect to our minds." The alien ship's response finally came, transmitted simultaneously through their computers and as a bone-deep resonance in their skulls. "Designatation, KRX Empire, your biological and technological distinctions will be evaluated for assimilation or elimination." "Well, that's not ominous at all," Marcus muttered, his fingers flying over his console as he strengthened their cyber defenses. Sarah's mind raced. First contact scenarios were supposed to be careful, measured affairs, not this brutal invasion of their systems and psyche. "Yuki, send an emergency burst transmission to command. Include everything we've learned so far." The crystalline ship suddenly began to transform, its surface flowing like liquid metal as weapon ports emerged from previously smooth surfaces. Multiple weapon systems activating, Marcus reported. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. "They're launching smaller craft," Lieutenant Commander James Morrison announced from Tactical. "Dozens of them. No, hundreds. They're moving in attack formation." Sarah's decision was immediate. "Plot an emergency jump course. Maximum distance. We need to warn Earth." "But Captain," Alinda protested, "this could be our only chance to learn about them, to understand." "They've made their intentions clear," Sarah cut her off. "And right now, we're the only ones who know they exist." Morrison, "Ready defensive systems." Rodriguez, "I need a weakness, anything we can use." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, even as the alien fighter craft closed in. The Defiant's advanced sensors captured terabytes of data about their attackers, but one pattern stood out. "Captain," Marcus called out, "their ships are moving with impossible coordination. No lag time in responses, perfect formation adjustments. It's like they're all part of a single organism." Sarah logged that information away. It could be crucial later. "Helm, execute jump on my mark. Morrison, give them something to remember us by." The Defiant's point defense systems roared to life, catching the first wave of alien fighters off guard. Several exploded in brilliant flashes of green fire, their debris causing others to adjust course. But their response was instantaneous and unified. Hundreds of ships moving as one to adapt to this new threat. Jump drive charged, the helm officer reported. Enemy vessels launching some kind of energy web, Morrison warned. They're trying to box us in. Sarah allowed herself a tight smile. The Cricks might be technologically superior, but they'd never encountered human unpredictability. Helm, execute combat pattern Chen Alpha. The Defiant suddenly cut all power, appearing to drift dead in space. The Cricks fighters moved in for the kill, exactly as Sarah had hoped. At the last possible second, power surged back through the ship's systems. The Defiant spun on its axis, its main guns firing a concentrated burst directly at the crystalline mothership, while simultaneously engaging its jump drive. Space itself seemed to tear open as the Defiant vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind a cluster of very confused alien fighters and a mothership with a fresh scar across its pristine surface. As the stars streaked past in the jump tunnel, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. Damage report. Minor systems damage only, Morrison reported. But Captain, our jump wasn't clean. They did something to our drive at the last second. We're off our planned course. Can we make it back to Earth? Morrison shook his head. Not directly. We'll need to make several smaller jumps, recalibrate between each one. Then that's what we'll do. Sarah turned to address her crew. What we've discovered today changes everything. The Cricks Empire clearly sees other species as resources to be consumed or destroyed. We need to get this information back to Earth so humanity can prepare. But more than that, we need to understand them. Every moment of contact, every byte of data we collected could be crucial. She looked at the tactical display, where the Cricks ship was now just a fading sensor echo. They may be more advanced, but they showed us something today. They're predictable. That perfect coordination of theirs, it's a weakness. They think like one entity, move like one entity. And that means they can be outsmarted. Dr. Santos spoke up, her scientific curiosity overriding her earlier caution. Their neural interface technology, if we could understand it, maybe even counteract it. Exactly, Sarah nodded. Every strength can become a weakness if you know how to use it. Our mission just changed, people. We're no longer an exploration vessel. We're humanity's early warning system. And perhaps, she allowed herself a slight smile, its first line of defense. As the Defiant limped through space, its crew began the arduous task of analyzing their encounter. They didn't know it yet, but their escape had already sown the seeds of the Cricks Empire's eventual downfall. Sometimes, the greatest threat isn't the strongest enemy, but the one that learns from every encounter. And humanity had always been very, very good at learning. 3 days after their encounter with the Cricks Empire, the HSS Defiant drifted in the shadow of a massive gas giant. The ship's systems hummed at minimal power as the crew worked to understand what they'd discovered and figure out how to survive long enough to warn Earth. In the ship's main lab, Dr. Elena Santos stared at holographic displays showing the neural patterns they'd recorded during the Cricks attack. Captain Chen stood beside her, arms crossed, watching as complex wave patterns danced through the air. It's beautiful, in a terrifying way, Elena said, manipulating the display with practiced gestures. Their neural network isn't just a communication system. It's a completely unified consciousness. Every ship, every warrior, connected in perfect synchronization. That's what makes them so dangerous, Sarah replied, remembering how the enemy fighters had moved with impossible coordination. But it's also what you think might give us an edge. Elena nodded eagerly. Look at this. She brought up a new display, showing the moment when the Defiant had played dead before jumping to safety. See how their entire fleet hesitated for 2.3 seconds. That's not normal combat lag. That's cognitive dissonance. Lieutenant Rodriguez joined them, carrying a tablet filled with his own analysis. They literally couldn't compute our irrational behavior. Their unified consciousness makes them incredibly efficient, but it also makes them predictable. Sarah finished. They think as one, which means they have blind spots, weaknesses that individual minds don't share. The ship's intercom crackled. Captain to the bridge. Yuki's voice carried an edge of urgency. We're picking up something unusual. Sarah hurried to the bridge, where Yuki and Morrison were bent over the sensor displays. Report. We've detected a transmission, Yuki explained. It's not Crix. The patterns are all wrong. But it's definitely artificial, and it's coming from the third moon of this gas giant. Could be survivors, Morrison suggested. We're not the first species the Crix have attacked. Maybe others have found ways to hide. Sarah considered their options. The Defiant needed time to fully repair its jump drive, and any intelligence about surviving resistance against the Crix could be invaluable. But it could also be a trap. Morrison, tactical analysis of the moon. Heavy mineral deposits in the crust would mask life signs from orbital scans. Lots of deep caverns, perfect place to hide if you're running from something. Sarah made her decision. Prep a shuttle. Small team, minimal signatures. I want to know what's down there. Hours later, Sarah led a small team through the moon's winding caverns. Morrison watched their backs, while Elena studied readings on her handheld scanner. The tunnels were clearly artificial, carved with precision through the rock. These markings, Elena whispered, running her hand along a wall covered in flowing script. They're similar to patterns we've seen in ancient ruins on other worlds. Whatever built this place, they'd been around a long time. A soft blue light began to emanate from ahead, and the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. What they saw inside made them stop in their tracks. It was a city, not just ruins, but a living, breathing settlement carved into the moon's heart. Beings of various species moved through the streets, some humanoid, others wildly alien. But they all shared one thing. They were survivors of Crix expansion. Welcome, warriors of Earth, a melodious voice echoed in their minds. A tall, willowy figure stepped forward, its crystalline skin refracting the chamber's light. I am Zixtal, last keeper of the Resistance Archive. We have been watching your flight from the Crix with great interest. Sarah's hand stayed near her weapon, but her diplomatic training took over. You know who we are. We monitor all Crix hunting patterns, Zixtal explained. Your escape was impressive. Few species have managed to survive their first contact, let alone damage a Crix mothership. The alien gestured for them to follow, leading them deeper into the hidden city. For 10,000 years, the Crix have expanded through the galaxy, consuming or destroying all in their path. Many have fought, many have died. But some of us learned to hide, to watch, to gather knowledge. They entered what appeared to be a massive library, its walls lined with holographic displays showing battles, star maps, and technical specifications. This is the archive, Zixtal said. Everything we know about the Crix, their technology, their weaknesses. And now something new to add. Your successful resistance. Elena was already moving from display to display, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her caution. This is incredible. Their neural network. It's not just technology. It's evolved with them over millions of years. Yes, Zixtal confirmed. The Crix were once many, but they feared the chaos of individual thought. They sought perfect unity, perfect order. Their neural network achieved this, but at a terrible cost. They lost the ability to truly innovate, to adapt to the unexpected. Sarah watched as Morrison examined tactical displays, showing previous battles against the Crix. That's why they react so poorly to unconventional tactics. They can't think outside their collective consciousness. Precisely. Zixtal's crystalline features shifted in what might have been a smile. And that is why your species interests us so greatly. Humans are unpredictable. You think as individuals, yet work together. You embrace chaos, yet forge order from it. You may be exactly what this resistance has been waiting for. Warning klaxons suddenly echoed through the chamber. A younger alien rushed in, its tentacles writhing in agitation. Keeper, Crick's ships have entered the system. Sarah's team tensed, but Zixtol remained calm. Do not fear. This sanctuary has remained hidden for centuries. Our shielding technology. They're using a new scanning pattern. The messenger interrupted. They're tracking the quantum wake of the human vessel. They've adapted, Sarah realized. They learned from our encounter, found a way to follow our trail. She turned to Zixtol. Your archives, can they be moved? The physical archives, yes, but the quantum core containing our primary database. Then copy what you can. Morrison, get back to the ship. Begin evacuation protocols. Elena, work with their archivists. Grab everything you can about Crick's weaknesses and countermeasures. Sarah faced Zixtol. You've hidden long enough. It's time to fight back. As her crew scrambled to action, Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. The Cricks thought they were hunting a single wounded ship. Instead, they'd driven humanity right into the arms of an ancient resistance, armed with knowledge accumulated over millennia of struggle. The real war was about to begin. The HSS Defiant's engine room had become a fusion of human and alien technology. Dr. Elena Santos worked alongside surviving resistance engineers, integrating salvaged components from the archive into the ship's systems. Captain Chen watched as crystalline processors were carefully connected to human quantum computers. The interface is holding stable, Elena reported, her eyes bright with excitement despite her exhaustion. The archive's data on Crick's neural frequencies is integrating with our systems. We can now detect their network's patterns and, more importantly, disrupt them. But we still have to get close enough to use it, Sarah reminded her. The rescue of key resistance members and critical archive data had been successful, but it had cost them time. The Cricks were closing in, their hunting patterns becoming more sophisticated with each passing hour. Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke up from his modified science station, where alien symbols now scrolled alongside human diagnostics. Captain, I think I found something. The Crick's neural network isn't just a communication system. It's their primary means of coordination. Each ship, each warrior, is like a neuron in a vast brain. And like any brain, Elena continued, catching his train of thought. It has specific frequencies, patterns it uses to maintain cohesion. If we could generate a counter-frequency, we could give them one massive headache. Morrison finished from tactical. He'd been working closely with Zixtol, learning the combat techniques that had kept the resistance alive for centuries. Sarah studied the tactical display, where red dots representing Crick's ships were slowly converging on their position. Their new resistance allies had scattered to other hidden bases, but the Defiant had kept the most crucial piece of technology, a prototype neural disruptor that had never been successfully deployed. Show me the plan, she ordered. Elena and Rodriguez pulled up a holographic simulation. The Cricks use quantum entanglement to maintain their neural network across vast distances, Elena explained. It's incredibly efficient, but it has one weakness. It requires periodic synchronization through central relay nodes. The simulation showed a massive structure floating in space, a Crick's synchronization hub. Every 36 hours, their ships must connect to these hubs to maintain neural cohesion. Rodriguez continued. We've tracked one such hub in the Carina Nebula. It's heavily defended, but if we can get close enough to deploy the disruptor during a synchronization event, Sarah finished, we could damage their entire command and control structure in this sector. It's more than that, Elena said excitedly. The feedback could cascade through their entire network. We wouldn't just disrupt their communication. We could shatter their unified consciousness, force them to think as individuals for the first time in millions of years. The implications were staggering. The Cricks' greatest strength, their perfect unity, could become their undoing. But the risks were equally massive. How close do we need to get? Sarah asked. Within 5,000 kilometers, Elena replied. Any further, and the nebula's radiation would weaken the disruptor's effect. That's suicide, Morrison stated flatly. Their defensive screen is at least twice that radius. We'd never get through. Unless, Sarah studied the tactical display more closely, unless we give them exactly what they expect. The crew looked at her questioningly as she began to outline her plan. The Cricks think in absolutes, in perfect patterns. They expect us to either run or fight conventionally. So we'll do both, and neither. Over the next hours, Sarah's plan took shape. The Defiant's engines were modified to leak specific radiation signatures that the Cricks would detect as battle damage. Resistance technicians helped install holographic projectors that could create the illusion of catastrophic system failures. Most crucially, they adapted their shields to channel energy in ways that would appear random to Crick's sensors. They'll think we're desperately trying to reach the nebula to hide, Sarah explained to her assembled crew. A wounded animal seeking shelter. Their programming will compel them to pursue and eliminate the threat, but their pattern recognition will tell them we're no longer capable of effective resistance. And when they catch us? Morrison asked. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. That's when we show them just how unpredictable humanity can be. The plan was set in motion 12 hours later. The Defiant limped toward the Carina Nebula, venting plasma and radiating the signatures of a dying ship. As predicted, the Cricks' response was immediate and overwhelming. 3 battlecruisers broke from the hub's defensive screen, moving to intercept. They're forming a containment pattern, Morrison reported. Standard Cricks procedure for capturing damaged vessels. Time to synchronization event, Sarah asked. 18 minutes, Elena responded. The hub is already beginning its power-up sequence. Sarah watched as the Cricks ships moved exactly as predicted, their tactical patterns flawless in their geometric precision. The Defiant continued its wounded flight, occasionally firing wild, ineffective shots that the Cricks easily evaded. They're sending boarding signals, Yuki announced. Standard neural interface attempts. Let them think they're partially succeeding, Sarah ordered. Feed them the false data we prepared. Through their newly modified sensors, they could actually see the Cricks neural network pulsing with satisfaction as it processed what it believed was another successful hunt. The battlecruisers moved closer, preparing to trap the Defiant in a triangular energy web. 5 minutes to synchronization, Elena announced. We're still too far from the hub. Hold course, Sarah commanded. Let them think they're hurting us. The Cricks ships pressed their advantage, pushing the seemingly crippled Defiant exactly where they wanted it, or so they thought. With each passing moment, they drew closer to their target, the hub's massive form now filling their view screen. 2 minutes to synchronization, 8,000 kilometers from target. The Cricks battlecruisers finally sprung their trap, energy beams lancing out to form a containment triangle around the Defiant. At that exact moment, Sarah gave the order they'd all been waiting for. Now, the Defiant's damaged systems suddenly roared to full power. The ship spun on its axis, its modified shields absorbing and redirecting the Cricks' containment beams. Before the collective consciousness could react to this impossibility, the Defiant shot forward, using the energy web itself as a launching point. 6,000 kilometers, Elena shouted. The hub's defenses came alive, but they were optimized to stop conventional attacks, not a ship using the Cricks' own energy web as an accelerator. The Defiant streaked through their lines, it told screaming from the strain. Disruptor armed, Morrison reported. Ready on your command. 5,000 kilometers. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos with crystal clarity. Fire. The neural disruptor activated, sending waves of precisely calibrated energy into the hub just as it reached the peak of its synchronization cycle. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a stone thrown into a pond, the disruption began to spread. Cricks ships began to falter, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos. The hub itself pulsed with erratic energy as its quantum links were severed one by one. Through their comm system came something none of them had expected. Individual Krix voices, crying out in confusion and fear as they experienced independent thought for the first time in countless generations. "Get us out of here," Sarah ordered as the hub began to break apart, its crystalline structure unable to handle the neural feedback. The Defiant jumped to safety just as the shockwave hit, carrying with it the death throes of the Krix's unified consciousness in this sector of space. As they emerged from jump space, the crew of the Defiant sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just accomplished. They hadn't just struck a blow against the Krix Empire. They'd shown that their perfect unity could be turned against them. "Send word to the resistance cells," Sarah ordered finally. Tell them it's time to stop hiding. The real fight begins now." The command center of Haven Station hummed with activity. What had begun as a hidden resistance outpost had transformed into the headquarters of a growing rebellion. 6 weeks after the Defiant's successful strike against the Krix synchronization hub, survivors and freedom fighters from across the sector had flocked to their banner. Captain Sarah Chen stood before a holographic map of known space, watching as new data streams poured in from recently liberated systems. The destruction of the hub had done more than just disrupt Krix communications. It had shattered their control over dozens of occupied worlds. Another successful uprising on Nexus Prime, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, updating the map. The local Krix garrison completely collapsed when their neural network failed. The indigenous population took control within hours. "And the garrison troops?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Same as the others," Alina answered, looking up from her research station. "Without the unified consciousness, they're lost. Most seem to have no memory of individual existence. Some are violent, confused. Others are almost childlike, having to learn independent thought from scratch." Sarah nodded grimly. Their victory had come with its own ethical complications. The Krix weren't just their enemies. They were victims of their own evolution, trapped in a system that had stripped them of individuality for millions of years. Commander Morrison entered the command center, followed by representatives from 3 different species, former slaves of the Krix Empire now turned allies. "The Drachnid fleet has pledged their support," he announced. "Their ships are old, but they know Krix patrol routes better than anyone. The collective will also stand with you," added Kittle, a towering insectoid whose crystalline exoskeleton caught the light. "Our hive minds give us unique insight into coordinated warfare, but unlike the Krix, we maintain our individuality." Sarah studied the tactical display, where dozens of allied ships now showed as friendly signals. The Defiant's success had proven that the Krix could be beaten, and hope was a powerful motivator. But their enemy was far from defeated. New intelligence from the outer sectors, Yuki called out from her communication station. "The Krix are adapting. They're implementing isolated neural networks, smaller consciousness clusters that can't be disrupted all at once." "Of course they are," Sarah mused. "They can't help but evolve, even if it means becoming less unified. The question is, can they adapt faster than we can exploit their changes?" Elena approached with a new data tablet. "We've completed analysis of the captured Krix neural interfaces. With modifications, we might be able to use their own technology against them, create false signals that their networks will accept as genuine." "A Trojan horse," Morrison said with a grim smile. "Feed them data that looks perfect on the surface, but carries our disruptor code deep into their systems." The station's alert system suddenly blared to life. Multiple signatures detected. Rodriguez called out, "Krix battle fleet entering the system. At least 30 capital ships." Sarah's mind raced. Haven Station's defenses were formidable, but they weren't ready for a full-scale assault. Not yet. How did they find us? "They didn't," Kittle chittered, his compound eyes studying the tactical display. "Look at their formation. They're not moving like a coordinated assault force. This is a sweep pattern. They're searching systematically, sector by sector." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Because they can't predict where we'll be. They're having to search the old-fashioned way. But they'll still find us eventually, Morrison pointed out. We need to evacuate. No, Sarah said firmly. We need to make a stand. Right here, right now. She turned to address the assembled allies. We've been reacting, hiding, striking from the shadows. But we've proven they can be beaten. It's time to show them that we're not just survivors. We're a force to be reckoned with. The next hours were a flurry of activity as Sarah's plan took shape. Allied ships moved into position, using the system's dense asteroid field to mask their numbers. Belina and her team worked frantically to modify their neural disruptors, creating specialized variants that could target the Krix's new isolated networks. The Defiant itself took position at the heart of their formation. No longer the lone survivor, it had become a symbol of resistance, its once pristine hull now bearing the marks of numerous battles alongside patches of salvaged alien technology. Krix fleet approaching optimal range, Rodriguez reported. Their search pattern will bring them past the outer asteroids in 3 minutes. Sarah opened a channel to the assembled fleet. This is Captain Chen. For generations, the Krix Empire has dominated through fear and absolute control. They believed their unity made them invincible. We proved them wrong. Today, we show them the true power of diversity. Different species, different minds, working together by choice rather than compulsion. She paused, watching as the massive Krix fleet drew closer, their crystalline ships refracting the light of Haven's star. Every ship in this fleet has a story of loss, of oppression, of survival. But today, we write a new story. Today, we fight not just for survival, but for freedom. For the right of all beings to think their own thoughts, to chart their own course. The first Krix ships entered the asteroid field, their sensors probing for signs of resistance. They were about to find much more than they bargained for. All ships, battle positions, Sarah commanded. Let's show them what free minds can do. The battle that followed would be remembered as the turning point of the war. The Krix fleet, expecting to find scattered refugees, instead faced a coordinated alliance of species they had once enslaved. Each ally brought their own unique tactics and technologies to bear. The Drachnid ships struck from hiding, their ancient weapons given new purpose with modern modifications. The collective's Hive ships released swarms of fighters that moved with both unity and independence, confusing the Krix's prediction algorithms. And at the heart of it all, the Defiant led the charge, its human crew demonstrating the tactical flexibility that had become their hallmark. Alina's modified disruptors proved devastatingly effective against the Krix's new network structure. Isolated consciousness clusters meant isolated weaknesses, and one by one, enemy ships fell into confusion as their neural links were severed. They're trying to retreat, Morrison reported as the battle entered its third hour. Their formation is breaking apart. Not retreat, Catal corrected, his antennae twitching. Look at their movement patterns. The isolated networks are reaching different conclusions. Some want to flee, others to fight. They're experiencing tactical disagreement for the first time. Sarah watched as the mighty Krix fleet dissolved into chaos, their perfect unity shattered not just by technology, but by the fundamental weakness of their approach. They had sacrificed adaptability for uniformity, creativity for consistency. All ships, press the advantage, she ordered. Don't let them regroup. Show them the strength of independent thought. The victory at Haven Station would become legendary, but its true importance lay not in the ships destroyed or the territory gained. It proved that the Alliance could stand and fight openly, that the Krix could be beaten not just through guerrilla tactics but in pitched battle. As the last enemy ships fled or surrendered, Sarah looked around the command center at the diverse faces of her allies, human, alien, synthetic, all united not by forced neural links, but by a common cause and mutual respect. Send word to every resistance cell and liberated world, she ordered. The time for hiding is over. The real war for freedom has begun. The bridge of the HS Defiant was silent as they approached the Krix homeworld. Through the main viewport, A massive red giant star cast a bloody glow across the crystalline structures that orbited the cradle of their enemy's civilization. After 8 months of continuous warfare, the Alliance fleet had fought its way to the heart of the Empire. Captain Sarah Chen studied the tactical display where thousands of Allied ships moved in formation behind the Defiant. Each vessel represented a different species, a different world liberated from Crick's control. Their fleet was a testament to unity through diversity, exactly the opposite of the Crick's forced conformity. Final system analysis. Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. The Crick's have concentrated nearly 40% of their remaining fleet here, over 2,000 capital ships, plus orbital defenses we've never seen before. They're desperate, Commander Morrison observed from tactical. This is their last stronghold, the source of their original neural network. If we destroy it, we end their ability to maintain unified consciousness across their empire, Dr. Elena Santos finished. She'd spent months studying the Crick's evolution, understanding how they'd transformed from individual beings into a collective mind. But the cost will be enormous, not just in lives lost, but in what it will do to them as a species. Sarah nodded grimly. The ethical implications of their mission had weighed heavily on her. Victory wouldn't just mean defeating an enemy. It meant fundamentally changing an entire civilization. Status of the neural disruptor modifications. Ready, Elena confirmed. We've integrated everything we've learned from previous encounters. If we can get close enough to their primary consciousness core, we can initiate a cascade failure that will sever all neural links across their empire simultaneously. They'll be ready for us, Morrison warned. Every tactic we've used, every strategy we've developed, they'll have countermeasures. Good, Sarah said with a slight smile. Because we're not going to use any of them. Lieutenant Yuki, open a channel to the fleet. As Yuki worked her console, Katol's voice came through the comm. The insectoid commander's ship had become the Defiant's shadow, their species' understanding of hive minds proving invaluable in predicting Crick's responses. We stand ready, Captain Chen. The collective awaits your signal. One by one, other Allied commanders reported in. The Drachnid fleet, their ancient ships now retrofitted with modern weapons. The freed Crick's vessels, crewed by those who had learned to think independently and chosen to fight their former masters. Even ships from Earth had finally arrived. Humanity's response to the threat Sarah had discovered all those months ago. Sarah took a deep breath before addressing the fleet. We all know what's at stake. The Crick's believe that perfect unity is the pinnacle of evolution. They've spent millions of years eliminating individual thought, forcing every mind into their collective. But we've proven them wrong. We've shown that true strength comes from diversity, from the ability to think differently, to adapt, to choose our own path. She paused, watching as the Crick's fleet began to move, their formations perfect as always. Today isn't just about victory. It's about freedom, the freedom to think, to feel, to be different. The Crick's homeworld holds the source of their neural network, the technology that started them down this path. Once it's destroyed, their empire won't just be defeated, it will be transformed. Every Crick's will have to learn to think as an individual again. The enemy fleet is advancing, Morrison reported. Standard containment pattern. Sarah nodded. Let them come, because that's what makes us different. We're not here for revenge. We're here to free them from themselves. She straightened in her command chair. All ships, execute Operation Metamorphosis. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. The Crick's fleet moved with their characteristic precision, expecting the Alliance to employ their proven tactics of disruption and chaos. Instead, they found themselves facing something entirely new. The Alliance fleet split into specialized task forces, each employing the unique strengths of their species. The collected ships moved in patterns that mimicked Crick's formations, drawing their attention, while Earth vessels executed unpredictable maneuvers through their lines. Drachnid cruisers used their ancient technology in ways the Crick's had never encountered, their weapons passing straight through modern shields. They're trying to adapt, Rodriguez called out as the battle intensified. Their neural network is processing new patterns, but something's wrong. Their responses are getting slower. They're overwhelmed, Elena realized. Too many variables, too many different threats to process at once. Their unified consciousness can't handle this level of complexity. Sarah watched as gaps appeared in the Crick's formation. All ships, press forward. Don't give them time to reorganize. The Defiant led a squadron of ships through the breach, driving straight toward the crystalline megastructures that housed the Crick's consciousness core. Enemy ships moved to intercept, but their reactions were becoming increasingly erratic as their network struggled to process the chaos around them. Multiple impacts, Morrison shouted as enemy fire raked their shields. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 7. Keep going, Sarah ordered. Get us within range of that core. The space around them was filled with energy weapons, missile trails, and the debris of destroyed ships from both sides. The Alliance paid a heavy price for every kilometer gained, but they pressed forward relentlessly. Core facility in range, Elena reported. Initiating neural disruption sequence. Sarah opened a channel to the Crick's fleet. This is Captain Sarah Chen. Your evolution took you down a path of forced unity. We're offering you a chance at something else, the freedom to think for yourselves, to experience life as individuals again. Surrender now, and we'll help you through the transition. The response came not in words, but in a massive surge of energy from the core facility. The Crick's consciousness was making one final attempt to assert control, to force unity not just on their own ships, but on the entire Alliance fleet. Neural attack incoming, Elena shouted. They're trying to integrate us into their network. But the Alliance was ready. Elena's modifications activated, turning the Crick's attack back on itself. The energy surge became a carrier wave for their disruption sequence, spreading through the enemy fleet like a virus. One by one, Crick's ships began to falter as their neural links were severed. The massive consciousness core pulsed with erratic energy as millions of minds suddenly found themselves thinking independently for the first time in countless generations. Core structure is destabilizing, Rodriguez reported. Total neural network collapse in progress.